coming up on Saturday, June 9th at the Silverton Casino. We're going to be out there with George Newry. It's the George Newry Live Rolling the Dice in Vegas show.
Chupacabra.
Yes, Chupacabra. I don't know if they're going to bring one with or what they're going to do. I'm not sure how that. Maybe he has a pet Chupacabra. I'm not sure exactly. Area 51, John Greenwald will be out there. We've got Daniel Brinkley, the guy who died twice. But did he die really? And Adam Garcia and his Amazing Crystals. George will have a band out there. He'll be singing and everything like that. He's going to have another guy with him out there, by the way, a guy by the name of George Knapp. And George, of course, you know from the Channel 8 News, and he's done an incredible job. I think he's been here forever. I think he was here when Vegas was born, as a matter of fact. Every time I see stuff going back to videos from the 80s and stuff like that, you're there. And all that stuff.
That's some very troubling video of young me.
Yeah.
When I still had color in my hair, yeah.
You were at the moment when Lefty Rosenthal and Harry Reid almost duked it out.
That was Ned Day. That was my mentor, Ned Day. I was here. I was in town, but I wasn't at that event that day. But that was right when I got to town, and that was an exciting time, man. We had mob stuff every day, and it wasn't just me. It was all of us. We all had mob stuff to cover. Because somebody was having a gaming hearing, somebody was having a court hearing, there was a robbery, there was a murder. It was an exciting time.
An exciting time. George Knapp, by the way, written about the Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm fascinated by this because when I heard about this, I right away went to WikiLeaks to check it out. I wanted to see what was going on, and they had a whole thing on it there, and I read about 2/3 of it, and then I had to put it down. It's freaky. It is honest to God freaky when you read that kind of stuff. We have weird stuff going on here in Nevada. This is in Utah, actually, but we have weird stuff going here in Nevada with Area 51, and then those two particular areas that are just to the west of 51, which no one talks about. People talk about 51, but that ain't where it's happening, as I understand it. It's like the areas, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, there's Area 52. There's a couple of secret areas out there. There's a couple of smaller secret bases. Things that get developed at Area 51 become operational at Area 52, Tonopah Test Range.
All right.
And there are some things in between that are not on any map.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you look in the Google satellite map, you can see it's all zeroed out. You've probably done that. It's very, very weird.
Yeah, you can't fly over it. There's a no-fly zone up there, and you certainly can't get in there. And if you try, you could be amazed how many people tell me, hey, let's just go charge Area 51. We'll all get in our RVs and charge it. They can't possibly stop us all. Yeah, they can.
Yeah, they will. I don't know how many years ago it was, maybe 10, 12 years ago, Nellis Air Force Base offered to give me a ride on a fighter jet, an F-16, F-15E. And so, what guy doesn't want to go on a fighter jet, right? In the Air Force, they say it's the second greatest experience in life. So you can figure the other one out. And so I went up there, and you have to do a little test ahead of time. Not a test, but you go into a room where they give you an idea on a map where you're going to go to and everything. And you get in the plane, and it takes off like a rocket ship. It doesn't take off like a plane. It goes straight on up. Great, great experience. And as we're heading north from Ed Ellis, he says, we're going to be turning because we're coming up to Area 51. They're going to go over to Utah. And I go, what if we just kind of went ahead? This is Air Force. It's an F-15. It's an Air Force from Nellis. What if we just went in there for a little bit? He goes, they'd shoot us down. This is an Air Force plane. They would shoot at our own.
For a while, during some red flag and other training exercises, you'd have pilots who thought it would be funny to accidentally go into that airspace, and they get chewed out. They get serious repercussions for those who did that stuff. After a first couple of them were really punished badly, they stopped doing it. But there are occasions over the years when private pilots have got lost and ended up landing there. They get debriefed, they get grilled, they get into a lot of trouble.
I'm here to talk to you about your stuff, but as long as you saw that, I've got to recount one thing to you, and then we're going to take a break, and I'll come back and talk about your stuff. Because I was working at a station in Sacramento when we were living in Marin County, and a couple times a week I would go back and forth. It was about an hour and 20-minute ride or so. Middle of the night, a little faster. You go on, I did the morning drive, and I was listening to Art Bell, who was the precursor of George Newry. And that night, a guy called in. I'll never forget this as long as I live, because whether it was put up or not, I had Art on my show after to talk about this, by the way. But a guy called in, and he was flying his plane, and he was going to fly directly toward Area 51. And he says, Art, I want to see what's there. Art's going, don't do it. I'm telling you, and they're going to shoot you down. He goes, let him shoot me down. I've got to see. I've got to see what's there. This is incredible. He's in a small plane, a biplane or whatever it was. And Art Bell's going, and no brakes. And the whole time I'm driving from Marin up to Sacramento, so an hour and 20 minutes. I'm following this the whole time, no brakes, straight on through. And the guy goes, Art, he's like, oh, wow, what's going on? He goes, a couple of Air Force planes have just come up on either side of me. Art says, get out of there, get down. He goes, no, I've got to see it. He goes, no, I'm going to go forward. Art goes, they're going to shoot you down. I'm telling you, I'm not kidding you. This really will happen. And the guy goes, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to see what's happening. So he's going forward. And the next thing you know, quiet, nothing.
And that's the end of your problem.
It's kind of like that, yeah. About 2 weeks later, I had Art on my show, and I said, whatever happened? He said, I never heard anything after that. It was legitimate. It was an actual call, but I never heard anything after that.
Well, I have a lot of experiences like that. It was not quite that dramatic, but there was a British producer, who wanted to get as close as he could to get the footage. Broad daylight. He gets the jets are right on him, and they're flapping their wings and telling him to get the heck out of there. I've been buzzed by helicopters, 20 feet over my head. I've been chased by the camo dudes. I was not popular out there for a long time.
You were at 51
Oh, yeah. We've been on the edge of it. I've been out there 100 times, over the years, looking in the desert to see what you can see, and got chased out of there a bunch of times.
George Knapp joining us. Some of these things you tell you about Skinwalker Ranch will make your skin crawl. It made my skin crawl. I guarantee you, you're going to be freaked out about some of this stuff. And then we'll get to your calls as well. 733-KXNT, 733-5968. One more thing, let me remind you, get your tickets now to the George Newry Live Roland Dice show in Vegas, because I found out today there are only 2 VIP packages left. 2, and that's it.
I'm glad it's 2.
And only a few preferred
Glad it's
as well.
not 3.
So it was 3. What a menage would go.
Oh, no!
All right. George Knapp joining us next right here on News Talk 840 AM KXNT.
Trending.
Rex is a very good man.
He fired him because
I like Rex a lot.
Stay informed.
Some serial bomber.
Austin.
By staying connected.
Thank you for your support, Mr. President of Pennsylvania.
We could find no evidence.
no collusion. Produced nerve agent.
It sounds to me like it would be Russia.
This is News Talk 840 AM KXNT. Welcome back to the Alan Stock Show. Callers and guests on the KXNT Live Line are powered by Best Mattress, your Tempur-Pedic headquarters.
.319 at KXNT, and good afternoon. Great to have you with us, and absolutely great to have George Knapp with us, the investigative reporter of Las Vegas, like forever. Actually, you came here in the 80s?
I came here in 1979.
79.
Right.
Just when all that stuff was happening.
What was peaking.
When it was when Oscar was really the mob lawyer, not the mayor talking about being a mob lawyer.
He was. He represented all those guys. Tough Tony Spilatro, Lefty Rosenthal, Joey Cusimano, Fat Herbie Blitzstein, all of them.
Fat Herbie Blitzstein. Never heard that described that way before. First of all, I want to get into other stuff, but what you've got in front of you, something we talked about when you first came in, I was watching Tucker Carlson last night, and he had this guy on. Tell me who I saw last night and what this is about. I want people to hear this.
His name is Luis Elizondo. He was, for a couple of years at least, in charge of something called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program within the Pentagon. Officially, the Air Force said that our interest in UFOs, the government's interest, ended in 1969 when Project Blue Book ended.
Right.
No one believed it. You didn't believe it, Alan. Neither did I.
Right.
Well, it turns out that they continued to collect information about cases that involve national security, encounters between these unknown objects and our military or nuclear missile bases, things of that sort. They've continued to collect it. Luis Elizondo, the guy who was on Tucker Carlson last night, was in charge of it from about the end of 2007 through last year. And he was unable to talk about it until he left the program, and then only within very specific confines, he arranged, as part of his departure from there, to put into the pipeline the release of something like 24 previously classified videos recorded by American warplanes. There's these encounters with unknown objects. This weekend, the third of those videos was made public.
By whom?
By something called To the Stars Academy. That's where Luis Elizondo is now director of security. It's headed by a guy named Tom DeLonge. It was founded by him. He's a former rock star who was very interested in UFOs and who has created this academy, stocked it with a lot of former government insiders, CIA types, scientists, and others for the purpose of trying to get to the bottom of this UFO mystery. Well, Lou Elizondo left ATIP, left the Pentagon. He worked directly under Secretary Mattis. Secretary Mattis was a good friend of his who had saved his life in Afghanistan. Lou left in part because he felt that this issue was not being taken seriously. They were collecting information. A lot of that information came here to Las Vegas. There was a private contractor, Robert Bigelow, created something called BASS, which took the information from the Pentagon, from other governments around the world, and analyzed it and tried to figure out what was going on. That lasted for 3 years, then the money was cut off. Elizondo left the Pentagon, went to work for Tom DeLonge, and along the way he released these videos, one of which he discussed on Tucker Carlson last night. And it's very dramatic. It's very legitimate. These videos are recorded by our best pilots flying our best planes, and this technology that they've encountered is far more advanced than anything we've got, anything that the Russians have got, anything that the Chinese have got. It's from, they're not calling it little green men. They're not saying it's from outer space. They're just saying it's unknown. And they'd like to know how these things work so we can build them and figure out how to build our own.
That's one thing that Tucker talked about last night. He said one thing we know, and Elizondo backed him up on it. They're not American. They're not made in the United States, and we're sure they're not Rusky either. So they're not made in this world. And Tucker said, I'm not going to get into the whole green men thing. What I want to get into is that these were flying side by side and had much more agility than our own jets. So these could definitely be a threat to us, and we ought to be finding out what this is all about.
Exactly, because as Harry Reid is the guy that got the money for the study here in Las Vegas. He and some colleagues in the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats, backed up the need to study this stuff. It went on for a couple of years before the money got cut off. But he had said, look, if the Chinese and Russians are studying this stuff, if they get a jump on this, we're in trouble. Because this technology is amazing. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's magic. The kind of acceleration, the G-forces it can do, it can be in the blink of an eye. It's on the other side of the sky. And it jams our radar, it jams our equipment, it jams our weapon systems. It can do things that we cannot do. And if the Russians or Chinese get it before we do, we're in trouble.
But everyone, the Russians, Chinese, us, we're all trying to look out, where did this come from? Who's behind it? What's behind it? Where did it come from? I'm
not sure anyone knows, to tell you the truth. No one wants to say it's from outer space. Maybe it's interdimensional. Maybe it's time travelers, us from the future. We don't really know.
It's from another world or dimension, though, some kind.
Some other kind of reality that intrudes on ours, yeah.
733 KXNT. Let me get Heather on real quick. Heather, you're on KXNT with George Knapp.
Hi, Alan. Hey, George, we met years ago at the Masters, back when Sunworld Airlines was actually in business.
How you doing?
Good. What I was calling about was that years ago when Sunworld was in business back in the 80s, our airplane disappeared off of radar for 15 minutes between Oklahoma and Las Vegas over New Mexico. And we had no memory time loss except for the people on the ground were having other airplanes that were going the other direction looking for the airplane crash because they couldn't get us to respond in that whole 15-minute time. And to the pilots, when they were talking to the ground, it was only seconds. But years later, I was watching an episode with you and John Lear, and I recognized John Lear as the man that picked me up off of the ground from the turbulence on the plane. And that was the last thing I remembered was his face. So they tried to convince us it was aliens, and I'd actually had some weird dreams that aliens had actually taken us onto their ship. And I realized it was either a weird dream or hypnosis because they added too many details that wouldn't be of my character into the memory.
So wait a minute, you were on this plane?
I was on the plane in Sunworld. I was one of the flight attendants, and it was John Lear that picked me up. I didn't know who the man was that picked me up until I saw George Knapp's show where he was interviewing John Lear.
Wow, George?
That's a heck of a. I don't remember that case, but that's a heck of a case. If I would be tempted, if I were you, to undergo hypnotic regression. If you get somebody who's legitimate.
Is that I know that they gave me hypnotic suggestions, and I know that John Lear was CIA, according to your documentary, and that made more sense than the aliens. And I always knew it was a weird dream. I never thought it was aliens, but I thought it was because they kept telling me that aliens had taken us that I had the weird dream.
And this was Sun Trip Airlines?
Sun World.
Sun World Airlines. Okay.
Sun World in the 80s. I saw you on there.
Wow. Incredible. Heather, I appreciate your call. I never knew that, by the way. So I appreciate your call.
Okay, take care.
Thank you very, very much. Wow. We'll come on back in a moment and continue and get your response to that. And then talk a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch, too. I mean, this is freaky stuff. I'm Alan Stockton. This is KXNT.
Wherever you work.
I am an IT technician.
I am an accounting manager.
Whatever you do.
I work as a photographer.
Whenever you listen.
En route to work or to the gym.
Download the radio.com app and listen to News Talk 840 AM KXNT. Anytime, anywhere. A free download in the App Store or online at KXNT.com. You're listening to The Alan Stock Show on KXNT.
3:33 here at KXNT, and a good afternoon. If you haven't done it yet, please do text the word STRONG to 72881, 72881. This is our Grab a Grand giveaway. Your chance to win a foul right here from KXNT. And we guarantee one randomly selected nationwide entrant will win $1,000. Text the word STRONG to 72881, and good luck from News Talk 840 AM KXNT. And don't forget, at 418, tickets to the Moody Blues performing their Days of Future Past album. That is a great concert. We saw it a couple of months ago. We're going to go see it again. And we'll be giving those tickets away at 418. Tickets are not on sale yet, but we've got them right here on KXNT. Speaking of tickets, also be sure you get your tickets to the George Newry Live Rolling the Dice in Vegas show, Saturday, June 9th from 5 to 8. All of us are going to be out there, and it's going to be at the Silverton Hotel and Casino. I guarantee George Knapp will be out there along with George Newry and Adam Garcia, Amazing Crystals, and some of the other folks, and it's going to be an amazing show. Only 2 VIP packages left. Get yours now at KXNT.com. George Knapp in the studio with me right now from Channel 8, KLAS, 8 News Now. I mean, got all kinds of handles there we could put on. But it's the investigative reporter for all of Las Vegas and southern Nevada, probably all Nevada. By the way, quickly, Daniel Brinkley, he died twice. What is that? You know about that?
Near-death experience, yeah. He's an interesting guy. I think he lives here. I think Daniel lives here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We'll have to get him on, too. All right, so tell me, Skinwalker Ranch, when I heard about it, I looked it up because I never heard of it before. And all of a sudden I look it up, and, God, you know, you read through some of that stuff, and your skin begins to crawl from what you hear about that. First of all, they say that people who've lived up there have seen blue orbs floating around and just right near their face and, you know, in their vicinity. Yes or no?
Yes. Yes, they have. In
what
fact,
are these orbs?
People have been seeing, I don't know what they are. I mean, people have been seeing strange stuff there as long as humans have been in the Uinta Basin, which is, you know, hundreds of years that we know of recorded history. The first Europeans to go through there were Spanish missionaries. They had what you would call UFOs floating over their campfires. It was recorded in their journals, Father Escalante. The Utes and Mormon settlers who've been there for hundreds of years have been seeing this strange stuff, not just UFOs, but creatures. You got cattle mutilations, you got Bigfoot sightings, you got all kinds of stuff. And the epicenter of all this activity of this particular ranch, 480 acres, beautiful, picturesque. It was purchased in 1996 by Robert Bigelow. That's how I got onto the story. Bigelow is a Las Vegas businessman, space entrepreneur. He's probably spent more money on UFO research than any human in the history of the world, millions and millions of dollars. And in the mid-'90s, he created something called NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, had a couple of astronauts, high-level scientists, ex-CIA guys on this board of the Science Advisory Board, and he had a rapid response team. If you'd had a UFO flap anywhere in the country, he'd put his team on a jet and send them out there. You had a bunch of cattle mutilations, he'd send them there.
Mulder and Scully.
Exactly. And he had a whole team of Mulder and Scullys. But he started getting these reports about this particular ranch in northeastern Utah. He flew up to meet with the guy who owned it, and by the time he got there, this rancher, college-educated guy, world-class game hunter, very expert at artificial insemination of high-end cattle, he, his wife, and his 2 kids were a wreck. By the time they had been living there for about 18 months at that point, they were all sleeping in the same room just for protection at night because they'd been terrorized. It started with these orbs. They would see these orbs. They were white ones that would flit around in the trees. Then they started seeing these red ones that would terrorize their cattle. It would go through the cattle and stampede them off of cliffs and just scare the hell out of them. Then these blue things would show up. They're larger than a softball, looked like they were made out of glass with these swirling, bubbling blue liquid inside. And these things had a way of activating the fight or flight center in your brain. I mean, it would literally drive you to your knees, making you so frightened at times. And there were some really terrible incidents involving animals that we can get into in a moment. But that was just the start of it. They started having experiences that we would equate with poltergeist activity. Seeing dark figures outside the window at night, hearing heavy footsteps outside. Then they started hearing them inside. Then they'd wake up at night and there's this giant humanoid figure at the bottom of the bed. Then the trickster element came into it. Just strange things would happen. The wife would go to a grocery shop and she comes home, puts all the stuff, takes it out of the bags, puts it in the cupboards, leaves the room, comes back, all the stuff's back in the bag. Or she would take a shower. She'd lock the door in the morning. She put her towel and a hairbrush on the cabinet, get out of the shower. The door's still locked, but the towel and the hairbrush are gone. She finds them later in the freezer or in the microwave. The rancher is out digging holes for posts for his fences in the pasture. It's using a big post hole digger, big heavy piece of equipment. He stops for a second, wipes his brow, takes a sip of water, turns around. This thing is gone. Finds it 3 weeks later up in a cottonwood tree. That kind of stuff would go on. They'd hear strange voices in the sky above them at night, like a conversation in a strange language, sort of mocking them. They started seeing classic UFOs, flying saucers, things that looked like the stealth fighter, but lined with Christmas lights. At night, the entire pasture would light up with lights from the sky. Sometimes it looked like the lights was coming from out of the ground that would light the whole thing up. They would hear noises underneath, like that sounded like it was an underground railroad, big heavy machinery that would rumble the ground under their feet. Then the bad things started happening to their animals. Cattle would walk right out into the middle of a snowbank. The tracks would end. The cow would never be seen again. Or they started having calves that were carved up with surgical precision right in broad daylight while they're out on the pasture. They had dogs that were vaporized by these blue orbs, just completely obliterated.
I read about the 3 of them that were obliterated. What about the guy you were starting to tell me before off air about the bulls? I guess they had a lot of cattle being destroyed, and he said something to his wife about the bulls?
Yeah, it seemed like whatever this presence was, this intelligence on the property, it could anticipate what was going to happen next, and it would mess with them. So he's got these 4 prized bulls that are in the corrals, and he says to his wife as they're driving by, boy, if anything happens to them, we're in big trouble. They drive back to one end of the property, come back a little bit later, and the bulls are gone. Now they're freaking out. They jump out of the truck. They're running around looking where the bulls are. Inside their this corral is a trailer that had been wrapped up. They got heavy wire around the door, and they used it only to store tools. The guy, just on a whim, looks in the grating at the top of this trailer. There's all 4 of the bulls. All 4 of these 2,000-pound bulls are crammed into this tiny trailer, and they're like in a trance. So he yells to his wife, "Here they are." And as he said that, the bulls wake up out of this trance. They start kicking and crashing and knock down the wall until they get out. Now, there is no way you could get one of those bulls with a forklift into that trailer, let alone all 4. And the fact is, the door was still locked. It had never been opened. The NIDS guys, the team from Bigelow's organization, flew up to the ranch. They got there a couple hours later, and what they found was that all of the corral, which was metal, had been magnetized. So whatever technology was used to get those bulls into the trailer used something that caused the metal poles to be magnetized, and it was just seemingly to mess with the rancher and his wife and just to get a reaction out of them.
George Knapp joining me in studio, and again, you can hear his many more stories coming up on June 9th when he appears with George Newry at the Silverton Casino in the George Newry live Rolling the Dice in Vegas show. All of us are going to be there, and there are only, as at the beginning of the show, there were 2 VIP packages left. I would say they're probably gone by now, but if you want to check on packages for it, go to KXNT.com and try to get yours. In a moment, I want to talk about something else, because you go up and you told me once that, some people who go up there, they follow, this energy follows people back. But you say some people go up there and this weird energy doesn't follow the people back, but goes to, it attaches to their spouses or significant others.
It's like a psychic vampire hitchhiker.
Yeah, I want this. That, to me, is the freakiest of them all. I want to talk about that in just a moment. George Knapp joining us right here on KXNT.
And the Oscar goes to
Alan Stock on KXNT.
3:49 at KXNT, and a good afternoon. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday afternoon. Tomorrow, broadcasting live from the Emerald Island Casino. We've got Sheriff Joe Lombardo out there, Steve Sisolak, Clark County Commissioner, and candidate for our governor. Derek O'Hara, who's a candidate for Nevada State Treasurer, and food specials and drink specials. It's going to be a lot of fun out there. George Knapp joining me right now in studio. You know him from all the investigative reporting at Channel 8 and 8 News Now, or KLAS. You pick it, doesn't matter. And he's going to be out there on June 9th with George Newry and a bunch of other people at the George Newry Live Rolling the Dice in Vegas show. Are you going to be singing with him in the band?
I don't think that's good for anybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me neither. So, no, I'm not going to be singing with him either. Quickly, you said people have gone up to this area and energy follows them back home. You told me about one story about a guy who went up there and the energy didn't follow him personally, didn't affect him, but it affected his wife. And you told me this story, and I thought that this is creepy. I want you to recount that.
These were, it was actually 3 people all at the same time that were, they had military backgrounds. They were armed when they went to this property, and they were sort of in a confrontational, had a confrontational sort of attitude. I don't know that they believed the stories about the property or not, but they were not going to take any guff. And they were in the middle homestead. It's 3 homesteads that make up this ranch property, walking along the road at night and got a creepy feeling. And suddenly they're confronted by a black hole. It was just blacker than black. And they froze. And this thing communicated to all 3 of them at the same time. It said, "We're watching you. You're not welcome here. Go away." They were frozen, unable to move for a while. Eventually it goes away. They go back. They're very upset. They leave the property. And in the days after they got home, it followed them. Something followed them. The one former military person had wine bottles blasting out of their home, breaking on the walls, moving around, poltergeist type stuff. Yeah. The second person, he didn't see anything, but his family did. So his wife is standing at the sink doing the dishes, looking out the window, and looks out, and there's a wolf standing on 2 legs, folding its arms and leaning against a tree looking at her. And she's kind of like doing a double take and looking at it again, trying to think if is she really seeing this? And right at that moment, she hears screams from the other room. It's the exact moment her kids saw this thing. She goes rushing over to them to comfort them. They look out the window. It's gone. Now, the story about the wolf is interesting because there had been other sightings of that creature at the property. In fact, the ranchers, the first day they moved in, the ranch family that had been terrorized, they encountered a wolf. They thought it was somebody's pet wolf, and it walked among them. They remember it had rained that day, and it was tame and peaceful, and they remembered it had a wet dog smell to it. It's walking among the family, and it sees a calf in the corral, the calf that had made the mistake of sticking its snout out of the bars. It leaps in the air, goes like 20 feet in the air, snatches down its jaws on this calf, and starts pulling it out of the corral. The rancher leaps into action. He grabs an axe handle and beats this thing on its back. Now, this wolf was so large, its back came up to the middle of this guy's chest. Beats it on the back with this stick, and it doesn't even react at all. His kid grabs a .357 from the handgun from the truck and comes over. The rancher shoots it 3-4 times. It doesn't make a sound, no blood, no anything. His dad comes out with a 30-06. He plugs it once. That's when the wolf lets go of the calf and just looks at him and it's going to start to leave. The rancher gives it one more shot right in the middle of the chest. A big chunk of fur and flesh flops on and falls onto the grass. The wolf turns around and goes back out to the brush line where it had come from. The rancher and his son grab guns. They're going to go chase it. Can't leave a wounded wolf running around the property, one that big. They follow it through the brush. They're following its tracks that are sinking 2 and 3 inches deep into the mud. They come into this clearing. It's 100 yards across. The tracks go out to the middle of the clearing, and they stop, and the wolf is gone. They go back. They're not quite sure what to tell the rest of the family. They go back. They pick up a chunk of flesh that had fallen off of the body when they shot it the 6th time, and it smelled like rotten meat. That was actually the first day the family moved in. They tried to put that behind them. If they had saved that piece of rotten meat, we might have some better answers about what this thing was, but they didn't. And then they tried to ignore stuff for the next 18, 19 months, and it got too much for them, and so they sold the property to Bob Bigelow, who put a team of scientists on there, and they were there for several years, and they recorded and experienced these things for themselves. A lot of people who go to that property take things home with them, and it seems like it attaches itself, not to them so much, it attaches and terrorizes their family. And I know this is hard to believe, Alan, but I've gone there almost 24 times now, and I've interviewed several dozen people who've had experiences on the property, PhD level scientists. They're telling me the truth. They're telling me things that really happened to them.
What's the name of the book that you wrote?
It's called Hunt for the Skinwalker.
Hunt for the Skinwalker. Okay. So you can pick that up in advance of seeing George out with George Noory on June 9th and get an idea what's going on. Hunt for the Skinwalker. All right. We'll have to check that out.
I'm going to give you a copy. We'll
all right.
See you later this week.
I'll see you on Thursday over there for our TV hit.
Yeah.
George Knapp joining us in studio. We're going to wrap things up in just a moment right here at News Talk 840 AM KXNT.